Thank you, everyone. And panelists, thank you so much for your patience. We are sorry we had some technical difficulties, but now we are back online and we're ready to begin. So again, hello, everybody. And on behalf of the Outright team, I would like to welcome you all to Out Summit 2021 and to our session today on strengthening advocacy through alliance building. I'm Yvonne Wamari. I'm the Africa Program Officer for Outright Action International. I'm joining you from Nairobi, Kenya, and I will be moderating today's discussion. In this session, Strengthening Advocacy Through Alliance Building, we will discuss the importance of building strategic and sustainable partnerships with like-minded organizations to advance human rights for LGBTIQ persons in restrictive states around the world. This session will highlight considerations, successes, and challenges in alliance building, and we will be getting the perspectives from Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe to better understand the importance of alliance building in the context of restrictive environments and the role that allies play in combating homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. So before we get started, this is going to be, initially was supposed to be a 55-minute long session, but we are down 10 minutes. So it's going to be a 45-minute long session, and we will have a 10-minute Q&A session at the end of the panel presentations. So please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A, and we'll address them at the end of the panel discussion. So leading this discussion today, we are joined by 4 exceptional individuals. We have Kaspars Zalitis, and who is one of Latvia's most prominent human rights defenders with close to 20 years experience in activism. Currently, Kaspars is the leader of a movement which is working towards the adoption of partnership regulation for all families in Latvia. Next, we have with us Jean Chong. And Jean Chong has been an LGBTIQ activist for more than 20 years in various capacities. She is the chairperson of the ASEAN Soji Caucus, a regional network of Southeast Asia LGBTIQ groups lobbying for the inclusion of LGBTIQ rights in the ASEAN human rights mechanisms. Jean is now the Asia advisor for Austria Lesbian Foundation for Justice. We have with us Zina Mohammed, a researcher, feminist, organizer, and holistic security specialist who works with marginalized groups and nonprofits on tools and tactics for security, sustainability, and embedding inclusive structures. Zina is the author of She Called Me Woman, Nameless, and has written on queerness and technology for publications like the This is Africa, Perspectives, BBC, and Premium Times. And lastly, we have with us Latia O'Neill, a young trans feminist activist and the founder and executive director of Transjo Etwa, a young organization based in Cote d'Ivoire, established in 2017. She is also part of various initiatives to strengthen the work of LGBTIQ organizations and communities, especially trans ones in West Africa and globally. She's a member of the African Queer Youth Initiative and a member of the board as co-chair. For the full bios of the panelists, please feel free to check in the section below the video and you'll be able to find the bios there. So moving into the discussion for today. So as we all know, building alliances with like-minded organizations is important for advocacy anywhere, be it with LGBTIQ organizations, activists, and other stakeholders, either for solidarity, to spread risk, or to amplify voices. And in your advocacy work, you have all registered successes. So would you say that building alliances has been pivotal to your successes in the advocacy work for equal rights and in the advancement of human rights for LGBTIQ individuals within the restrictive jurisdictions in which you live in? And as you respond to this question, I would also like you to reflect a little bit on some of the unlikely allies that you have worked with and how they have contributed to your work in the advancement of human rights for LGBTIQ persons in the various contexts. So we have 8 minutes. We have 8 minutes to respond to our questions. So I will first start with Jean. Please feel free to unmute yourself and proceed.
Oh, I got the hot potato first. Thank you for inviting me. I think when Yvonne asked me this question about building allies, I've always come to the topic with really mixed feelings, but I'll explain it a little bit later. But just to give you a little bit of context about Singapore, Singapore is in Southeast Asia, pretty near to Malaysia, Indonesia. We're a really small country, and we used to be a British colony. So obviously we inherited laws that discriminate against LGBT persons, which is similar to some countries, Section 377. But the difference about Singapore is Section 377 criminalize behavior, meaning sodomy, but in 2000, I think 2007 or 8, they changed it to target gay men. So sex between consenting men, 377A is now illegal. 377 is no more. So it was a first case for us, at least, a very specific target at an identity group. So, and recently Civicus has downgraded us in the democracy index from obstructed to repressed. So this is the state of where we're at. We have a really authoritarian government, but with 377A, some of the things that with the discourse that we work on is to expand this idea that discrimination is not just about gay men, and what are some of the cascading effects when you have a law such as this. It affects LGBTIQ persons as well. So what we're talking about allies. So I would always like to tell a little bit of story since I have a couple of minutes. So about 10 years ago, when I first tried to engage in the treaty body, CEDAW, I went to a women's meeting with numerous NGOs. And the response I got from them is that, oh, we don't accept others like you. So I came away being labeled others and not in any way included in the civil society space. I went away in the meeting really angry and also pretty emotional, because I mean, the discrimination was so in your face. But luckily, we have friends and allies all over the world. I had other activists who taught me how to utilize the treaty body, outright help us with to teach us how to write the report and so on. And we successfully engaged in the treaty body process. And it was quite gratifying for us to be there and having the CEDAW committee members scold the local women's NGOs for not including us. But 10 years, a couple of years down the line, it taught me a really important lesson about building alliances and why is it so important. And that one significant moment was when I realized when it matters, none of the civil society groups was willing to support us. So, but from the experience, we have used other approaches to build this alliance. One of them is using the treaty bodies that we focus on the process, and we see as a way to educate other civil society groups about LGBT rights. And I think over the years, eventually, it came to a point that they understood the nuances of what we're facing, and being able to sit in a meeting with government officials and them advocating for LGBT rights without me saying anything was a great step forward for us. But obviously, again, not everyone is accepting. Some is obviously just a matter of token speaking. But the other question was about unlikely allies. This is where the mixed feelings comes in. I think one of the most unlikely allies came from government officials, because a lot of times our government officials, they don't have the best track records. They might support death penalty. They might support the repression of freedom of speech, but we work with them on enhancing protections for domestic violence against LGBT persons, then the struggle for us is, should we work with them and the urgency of protecting people from violence in the family, which is a big thing for many Asians, LGBT persons. So that's the most unlikely scenario. I mean, the most uncomfortable, but yet the most important kind of engagement and negotiation that we have to go through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. I will turn over to Zina, if you could just unmute and then go ahead.
Hi, folks. So I think I'm just going to do the same thing that Jean did and give a little context as to what the situation is like in Nigeria, where I do a ton of my work. So as a lot of you know, Nigeria is still one of the places in the world that criminalizes homosexuality, including with a death sentence, depending on what side of the country you live in. In other places, it is punishable by 14 years imprisonment, including things like supporting LGBT work. Can you hear me better now? I hope so. So supporting work with being an ally. In fact, something as little as witnessing same-sex marriage is criminalized by 10 years imprisonment. So Nigeria is a pretty tough place to be queer or to support work with queer people and to be a visible ally. But that has spaces. All right, I'm just going to turn off my camera and see if that improves internet. Right, so we've had allies in different spaces in the past years. I think one of the strongest allies that have come true have been people who work within Nollywood. For those who don't know, Nollywood is Nigeria's version of Hollywood, and puts out about between annually and has a lot of influence on the African continent. There was a research done by a professor called Mama Azua early 2000s that showed the representation of LGBT people to be significantly negative every time there were LGBT people on set or on screen. They were portrayed in the most negative light at least 85% of the time. So we started working with producers and directors in Hollywood to educate them about the harms that were being done by groups when there's a negative portrayal of LGBT people, and finding ways in which we could actually teach them about gender and sexuality. And that proved to be super successful, right? Eventually, there was another study that was conducted. So in the past 4 years, there has been a significant reduction in the representation of LGBT people in Hollywood. And that's a good thing because all of the representation was bad. Now there's very little or none. All representation of LGBT people now comes from queer producers and queer directors, and all of it is positive. So that worked out really, really well. And to think of one of our most unlikely allies, I think in the past few years, or in the past year since the beginning of COVID, one of the most unlikely allies that we've had has been a alcohol producer. It's called Cocktails. I know it's really nice. They make cocktails. They're a big deal, and they've been very vocal about their support for LGBT people and for non-discrimination. And they have like pride collections during the month of June. So this is something that is actually criminalized, and they're just like, we don't give a hoot. We're going to stand by these people loudly. We're going to stand by them publicly. And if you believe in our business, you're also going to believe in the rights of these people. So it's been very heartwarming to see people, especially business, step up and say they are going to do the right thing.
Oh, Zina, you're muted.
Yes, Yvonne, I muted myself because I had reached the end of what I was saying so that we don't take time.
Okay, thank you so much, Zina. From there, I'm going to move on to Casper's. Just unmute yourself and then feel free to
Yes.
share.
Hi, I'm Kaspers. I'm from Latvia as well. To just give you a brief context where I'm coming from. So it's Northeast Europe. Latvia has been under the Soviet Union for quite some time, and when similarly we have a kind of took this mindset as well for the several generations when it comes as well when we talk to LGBT issues. We are a full member of the European Union, and this is what I always mention. European Union always looks so nice and shiny, and we love to teach other countries how to deal with democracy and human rights. While I can clearly say that EU has a lot of problems between its member states, and what we see as well, and it's happening in the European Union and as well in Latvia, that we are declining in democracy, and there is more and more anti-LGBT and anti-gender movements happening. Those are influenced usually by two sides of a pond. So one is our tiny neighboring country called Russia, and other country is United States. So they far right movements where they joined forces, and we are sort of in the middle. And there are several activities that have happened against us. That have been initiatives, and there's still initiative going on. And while the rest of the world was moving forward, and the rest of the Europe was moving forward and talking about marriage equality or registered partnerships, we went backwards. We said that marriage is a union between man and a woman. Now, just in the beginning of this year, and as well during this year, they tried to narrow down the family as a union between a man and a woman. So which is completely insane when we look on the so-called European Union is again teaching everyone else how to live, and in the same time not dealing with the problems between its member states. But I'm from the movement Zivisbiedri, so this is a movement that kind of organized between the LGBT organizations and many other organizations in order to push for the partnership bill. And how we started as well, this was, we found a common ground. And so this is a building alliances. We found a common ground. And when it comes to, it's like one thing that we were all fighting for is for the recognition of families. And this is a one thing, and that's something that we have all in common. There are always going to be some people that kind of think their family is the right family, but everyone has families, and we have as well told the stories about, we cannot all be nice and shiny. It's like mother and a father and two children, as everybody wants to see it in our part of the world. There are single mothers, there are single fathers, there are same-sex couples, there are people that live just together. Let's say they're friends for 25 years, and everybody deserves, everybody deserves equal rights. And this was something that we went over with a message. Everybody, obviously, we're all evil gay agenda, whatever that means, but our common message was about families, and about that this is for the protection of all families. And so far we have had always ups and downs, but we have organizations with the women's organizations. This is usual suspect, but we also had an organization, the children's organizations that were fathers organizations that are joining in, and as well as they were mentioning as well, some of the businesses already as well start to slowly step up and talk about the recognition, because the state doesn't protect their employees, and we really want to have the best employees working, but they're not going to work it in our country. They're going to move away just because they don't feel, and their families, their loved ones don't feel protected. So these are some of the alliances that we're building. And as well, I have to say, it's like some of the unusual unusual partners have become as well, for example, the Ombudsman Office. It's like, again, the Ombudsman, the human equality body of the country, that for a long time has been quite reluctant, let's say it, now on working on LGBT issues, but now pushing us forward the agenda. We are also, what makes us different is like our tone of voice of how we're speaking. We are always going on the constructive dialogue. We know that the other side is usually, call us evil, call us, whatever names it is. We always respond, if you think that you called us in some of the name that we haven't heard it before, we have heard everything, and if you call us in a new name, we'll give you a golden star for this. But we always try to come with a constructive dialogue with whenever a government is asking for the opinion, we always prepare an opinion which is clearly made and as they're expecting. So we work with lawyers that we usually were not kind of working and kind of didn't ever thought of working on LGBT issues, and now they're champions. And one thing that we're trying to do is like, we definitely understand the community, we're listening to the community, but we always give an ownership to others. For those people who have achieved the victories, either they're allies or part of the community, they own the victories. It's not the LGBT movement itself only that owns the victories, everybody. And one other thing is on building alliances, I believe, which we all often as well forget about, is celebrating the tiny victories. It's like, we as an activist, we always want to push forward and move forward, but we forget to take care about ourselves, and as well we forget to celebrate tiny little victories together with all our allies. And this is how we're building. And so far, it's like since we recriminalized homosexuality, decriminalization for it was 30 years ago, we had 7 attempts on introducing the same-sex partnerships, and now we have 2 constitutional court judgments that recognize same-sex family as a family, and the only ones who are not hearing is the majority of the politicians. Even the society now, it's over 50% of the society is for recognition of the family in a broader context, but the problem is that our politicians, it's like they want to say they're listening to their people, but numbers are showing that they're not listening to the people, and so that is one thing that we're trying to work. It's like, we're going to knock on their doors. If they're not going to open the doors, we're going to knock on the window. We're not going to knock on the roof, and so on. So, keeping forward, and as well, it's always reminding our message. This is our main priority, and that families is something universal. Everybody has a family, and that's our main thing. I probably did over the time, right? I always speak for hours.
No, it is well. We are well within time. Thank you so much, Casper. Latia, I'm going to move on to you, and you can perhaps share your experiences from the trans perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. So to answer this question, I think that this is very important to have allies, because in a context where people think that being an LGBTIQ person is not African, it's difficult to talk about the human rights of LGBTIQ people. So one of the most effective ways that we can address this issue is to have allies who are willing to speak for us in spaces where we don't have the opportunity to come in and speak for ourselves. So to illustrate this, I can say that with the efforts of some allies, for example, transgender community, especially in Ivory Coast, have been integrated into the national AIDS plan, and this has allowed us to, as transgender organization, to benefit from capacity building in order to better address the health issues experienced by transgender people, especially by trans women, but also beyond that question of health issues. But you know, in our context, always, especially in Ivory Coast, to be able to talk about human rights, we first have to talk about HIV, and this can be very frustrating sometimes because our lives are not always about this disease. And so, yes, it's important to have allies, but we need to have allies who are willing to deconstruct these different barriers and effectively address the issue specifically. So finally, what I would like to add is that we need to thank some partners here, like ISDAO, which is a funder based in West Africa, and also the African Queer Youth Initiative, will allow us to enter spaces like the ACHP and many other conferences where we don't always have the opportunity to be heard and considered in order to speak and represent and also present our experiences and to advocate effectively for our rights. So yes, it's important to have allies, but it's also important to strengthen our capacities as LGBTIQ activists to better speak for us and not always being under allies and leave these different allies speak for us, because it's important that LGBTIQ take the lead and fight for our effective human rights. Yeah, that's what I would like to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you all. Maybe just to just a follow-up question, and I'm going to give you all like 2 minutes to respond to this question. In the work that you have been doing, so you've mentioned a lot about the unlikely allies that you have had and the successes that you have seen in the work that you have done. Maybe just mention one challenge that you have experienced in alliance building and how you have overcome that. So Jean, I'm going to start with you because you already mentioned one of the challenges, and maybe just how you overcame that challenge as well. So please proceed, just 2 minutes for each.
Yeah, yesterday I was in a gender-based violence panel as well. I think one of the ways we overcome it, especially in the context of Singapore, is to find a language that resonates with the context. Like, I mean, one of it that I talk about a lot of times is talking about family harmony, talking about using words like duty of care instead of a or more Western-centric human rights language, because it's not something that the public understand or embrace, or absolutely not embraced by the government. So that's one way to that I embrace it, but I don't always think that I don't always want to build alliances. I think this, which is a little bit controversial, specifically in my panel, right? So we have to discuss. I think one of the groups that are not super keen to build alliances is with religious institutions, because I don't think that the way that it's structured, at least in Singapore, is useful. What we did was we went through the legal route by making sure LGBT person is listed as a protected class in one of the against hate speech by religious groups. So while I pick and choose, I think it's important to have different strategies Yeah. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll move on to you, Casper. Same question, challenges and how you manage to overcome them. Maybe just one challenge. You have 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, I think that the greatest challenge, and let's get it out and loud about it. Our greatest challenge is over sexualizing the LGBT community. Is like this is sometimes when I'm getting so tired in our region about when we talk about sexuality, everybody kind of, not everybody, but a lot of people just see the first 3 letters. It's like, I definitely understand that that's something that they want to talk about, but we are talking about the people, and we have always overcome and explain people that we are not sexual predators, and we are not interested in sex in the 24/7, and that's what we invite them to actually to see our families. We invite them to our events. We tell the stories, and at the end of the day they suddenly understand, oh, you have the same problems that we have. It's like, yes, hello, it's like, we've been telling you that for 30 years, but it's okay. It's like, we can tell you again. And this is a one thing that we always that we get in the challenge. We even get in the governmental working groups about people talking about how you can have children. It's like, I know how it is, but why do you speak it out to the public? And it's like, they're always, a lot of times they're said, it's like, don't show how you live your life. Nobody has ever invited you to my bedroom or even my apartment. It's like, the only thing that I'm here to talk about my rights. And this is how we actually have overcome this. Is like, whenever they speak about something abstract or their fantasies, we actually show how that we are the same. It's like, we have the same rights, we deserve the same rights, we have the same problems, we have the same issues. And then they see, it's like, oh yes, you also pay taxes, oh, you also have children, you also breathe on this way. So, and we find the common ground. So, but I think the biggest challenge, I think, all over the region is this over-sexualizing the community. It is not about the first 3 letters, it's about our identity.
Thank you so much, Casper. Zina, I will move on to you. If there are any specific challenges, or maybe just one challenge that you have faced in the advocacy work with regards to alliance building, and how you managed to overcome that. So, Zina?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges continues to remain just the dehumanization of queer people, in the sense that even people you think you can build allies with do not get past their prejudice to see the humanity of people who identify as LGBT. So the struggle, for example, of recognizing, say, trans people within the feminist movement has been an ongoing discussion, not just in the US and in the UK, but also a burning conversation that is being had in Nigeria, because people who identify as feminists do not yet see the full humanity of people who are the T within the LGBT movement and continue to be trans exclusionary. So that has been a bit of a worrying trend. And I think one of the things that has happened was in the last few conversations of queer people reclaiming the idea of family, right? So in Nigeria, again, it's very common where there's a belief that people who are queer are either going through a demonic possession, or there's something spiritual that is the cause of us being LGBT. So just reclaiming and saying, listen, we're full humans, kind of how was talking about, and also most importantly that we have rights to family, right? LGBT people have rights to have access to their parents, and same with parents to their kids and kids to their grandparents. And saying these are things that exist, and you're bringing in Western concepts to break down African values of holding families together, and that has been super helpful. When people see our full humanity, they say, oh, actually, we have very similar issues, we're similar people, and we could work together to ensure that everybody has access to family, because family is something that everybody holds firmly and closely.
Thank you so much, Zina. Latia, same question.
Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the problems we have is that to talk about human rights, we should talk about HIV first. And like I said before, this can be sometimes frustrating because our condition of life is not always related to HIV. So to tackle this situation, we put our effort in sharing life experience of trans people in Ivory Coast to let our different partners to show them that our needs go beyond HIV and health, and our needs touch mostly the realization of our human rights, because without them we can't really have access to health, because firstly we need to have ID papers that correspond to our expression and affirmation of our gender identity. And without this kind of papers, we can't really access to health. So we continue to share our different experience of life related to all fields of our lives, to let them know that our needs go beyond health and HIV. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. In the interest of time, we'll move on to the Q&A session. So we have 4 questions that have been posed. So I'll just read out the questions. So this first question is from Grace Poor, and this is to all the speakers. Please share your efforts to address exclusionary practices, including sexist or racist or nationalist and classist positions taken within LGBTIQ groups and communities, as this really affects alliances and strengths of activism. So that's the first question. So please feel free to unmute, and then you can just go ahead.
I think I'd like to take a hack at that. So one of the things that has been such an ongoing thing in Nigeria is the fact that some of the biggest movements, some of the biggest organizations are now being led by women when they have traditionally been led by men. So there was a lot of sexism and misogynistic conversations about how, oh, the lesbians are taking over the movement, the gays are now being silenced. So we have to start doing consciousness raising, right, to ensure that people have a better intersectional view of the movement and places that we're trying to get to. Because one of the things is that we assume that just because we're being equally oppressed, that we have an equal understanding of these issues, right, of sexism, of trans exclusion, of classism. So it needed to start being small discussions within groups and ensuring that we were educating ourselves before proceeding to even find ways that we could build alliances within the LGBT movement, just between the lesbians, the gays, the trans, the intersex people. So it was just consciousness raising.
Okay.
If I can add as well, it's like we're no unique in this, and we do have as well the conflicts growing within the community, and that directly affects as well our alliance building. But what we're trying to explain everybody else that, you know, we are not we're not the same people everywhere. It's like we are not like, you know, these shiny bright things. It's like we're not always we're going to be always perfect as you want us to see. We have different shapes, and we have we have different problems within the community, and we are working on them. But the one thing that we have in common is the lack of equality and lack of equal rights. And yes, we recognize that we have the problems, and we say, for example, we have the anti so-called turf movement within Latvia as well is growing, and we are not we are speaking about these, but we're officially not including these activities in our agenda. We said that our premises, our events, they are free from discrimination, and that is not just coming from outside the movement, but that is as well the question within the movement. It's like we are not going to be excluding some of the people from our community, and if your agenda is you're no better than some other radicals that are fighting our rights. So we are trying to send a clear message that we are inclusive, and as well to our allies to say that, you know, just because we are the LGBT people, it's like we don't need to be, you know, just pitch perfect, right? We are the same people as everybody else.
You can go ahead, Jean.
Okay. Well, I saw Grace's question was answered very well by the others, but I'm tempted to say with grace and posture, of course. But anyway, I'll answer the two questions that's targeted at me. One was about, there's this movement in Singapore called True Love. It essentially is an old strategy packaged with new words, freedom of expression words. What the group does was to convince, there's a church motivated group. It was to say, oh, love the sinner, hate the sin. So essentially it's the same thing, but what's really insidious was that they say they are part of the LGBT community, we should accept them even though they reject their identity or practices and things like that. So yeah, so what do I think of them? Not very well. It's I mean, because I think the trends have changed. In Singapore, I don't think LGBT hate speech is not as acceptable as before, but that's why the language, and they've started to co-opt some of activist language as well. You asked me about hate speech. Maybe let me expand a little bit about the hate speech part that I was talking about. In Singapore, we have a religious harmony bill. Singapore is a really multi-religious and racial country, so the government is really sensitive about conflicts between different race and religion. So I think about 2 years back, they have a religious harmony bill, and we read the trend correctly. We knew that they were not concerned about religious groups. What they're concerned about is extremism from religious groups. So we started advocating and saying that, how about extremism for religious groups, targeting vulnerable groups, and trying to convince them to not only say LGBT people, but new migrants or other class of minorities as well. So in that whole cluster, we'll include that were against, like, the hate speech is not inciting or violence of any kind is not allowed against us. But the law is new and has not been used yet, but it's already in the books, and it's the first time that we even mentioned in any legislation. And that was how it came about, and we took the opportunity to look at some of the policies they're thinking about and convincing them to include us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Jean. I will move on to Latia, if you would like to respond to Grace's question.
Oh, yes, I think that's the first question, right? Okay, so in our context, we have some difficulties to have a connection with traditional feminists who say that feminism is mainly about biological women born with a female gender, and we as transgender women, we are not real women. So to So to address this difficulty, we still continue to raise awareness that feminism fights against oppression, and we experience oppression as well as all other feminine people, and even through these oppression are not the same, but each person's operation are not the same. So they are just operation that we need to fight against. So yes, it's the awareness and education around the transgender issues that help us to integrate this kind of movement to achieve our goals in relation to our rights. I hope I made sense.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
So on to the next question. This is from Luisa Viado. I would like to ask if the panelists have cross-regional or cross-movement examples on alliances that work or are good practices. Anybody can just unmute and go ahead.
If I can say, it's like for us the cross-regional, we're not doing that much, because it's like we like to stress that protection of all families is something very Latvian. It's like it's very local, and should not be influenced by any foreign power. But what we have across other movements is like we are building. We are participating in other movement events. Like, for example, we are always participating in the activities, for example, with the people with the disabilities. We are always participating in events when we talk about anti-Semitism. We are talking about, when we talk about racism, we are always present at all the other discussions to show that we are allies to other movements as well. And what we get in the response is their support towards us in the same time, because suddenly, because like we're kind of out of this bubble. It's like this is just our own issue. We generally speak not just about equality, but we speak about human rights. And there is this point, if one group is attacked, sooner or later it's going to be another one. And this is what we've seen in our part of the world, this anti-women movement. There's anti-women's rights, then we see the anti-LGBT, now is an anti-trans community, and then we see anti-immigrant. And at the end of the day, they're literally all the same people who are against these people. So now we join forces with other movements in order to speak about human rights, not just about our issue.
Thank you, Casper. Anybody else want to respond to that question? Jean, in the Asian context, cross-regional or cross-movement examples?
I think for us is in the earlier years, I think a lot of civil society, including LGBT groups, rally around Southeast Asia intergovernmental grouping, where they're developing the human rights mechanism or declaration. So that was a point of alliance building amongst a lot of the civil society groups. It was pretty good because it gave us a huge platform to do intersectional advocating with child rights groups, with refugee groups, and so on. So that's one really good example. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Zina or Latia, from the African context, if any of you want to take on the question?
I'm going to take a at that. I think one of the ways that we did cross-movement allyship was the recent conversation in Nigeria against police brutality, where people, especially young men and women, were tired of being policed about how they presented and why the police roughed them up. So it was the first time that straight people could see how people's presentation could be a negative thing that they were experiencing, and they spoke up. And I think it was the first time that straight people were properly allies to queer people in Nigeria, because they understood the harassment from police based on people's presentation.
Latia, would you like to add on?
Yes, so what I would like to add within my context is that, you know, the transgender movement in West Africa is so young, and in each country, like in Benin, Burkina, Togo, Ghana, even if in Ivory Coast, things are growing up slowly, step by step. So we found important to have like a network. So since 2017, we have a forum in West African, in West Africa, that is the West African Trans Forum, that works with the trans network of East and South Africa. So this kind of work help us to address the problems of trans person all around the African continent effectively. And this also has resulted in the African Trans Network since 2021. And yes, we continue to looking for ways to make this forum, this network growing up for the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Latia, and thank you so much to all the panelists who have been with us today, and for all the participants who have joined us. Unfortunately, we're not able to respond to all the questions that have been asked, but please feel free to reach out to the panelists in the networking section. You'll be able to find them there. Just feel free to direct questions to them via message.